Welcome to the Peace Studio webinar. We are thrilled to be partnering with Weird Enough Productions on a webinar discussing peace building and its links to visual arts and creation. And we're thrilled to be able to partner with Weird Enough Productions on this co-commission. Weird Enough Productions is a comic company that uses comics and superheroes for literacy and emotional learning in elementary, middle, and high schools. Weird Enough creates diverse stories that make young people feel seen and valued, and is home to The Uncommons, an award-winning webcomic with over 800,000 readers. So we are absolutely thrilled to be able to welcome the CEO and founder of Weird Enough, Tony Weaver Jr. Welcome, Tony. Tony is an award-winning writer and educator, creating diverse stories that make young people feel seen and heard. And Tony, you want to tell us a little bit more about Weird Enough?
Yeah, so Weird Enough is a conglomerate of things. I think that the best way to describe Weird Enough is that it's a giant social experiment to see what would happen if we empower diverse stories and really put the reins in the hands of people of color and people from other marginalized groups to tell the stories that they feel like matter. We know that media is really powerful and that it has the potential to be really impactful for people. So the idea for Weird Enough is, what if we could create diverse media and also link it to a litany of different types of impact? So we have our original series, The Uncommons. We partner The Uncommons with lesson plans, activities, and projects that help young people become heroes in their own way and help them develop the confidence to tell their own stories. So we're operating kind of parallel in the lane of education and youth development, as well as media and storytelling.
That's amazing. Thanks, Tony. We're also thrilled to have Erica Bauman, who is a publishing professional and literary agent with Avitas Creative Management. And she represents a wide range of authors with a specialty focusing on books for young people. I don't know if Erica, you want to share a little bit more about your focus and area of expertise?
Sure. So I primarily focus on children's and young adult books, both fiction and nonfiction, that explore a wide array of characters and stories, and reflect the diversity of our world.
Thanks so much. And Tony, I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about this offering that we're, partnering with Weird Enough on, and tell us a little bit about the artist and sort of how the process worked and how it evolved.
Definitely. So the piece that we're going to be unveiling today is called On Common Ground. I had the opportunity to work with an artist I really admire and appreciate, Indigo. And the idea was kind of to take the sense of joy and whimsy that is present in a lot of Bree's work and partner it with the general themes of partnership and alliance that are present throughout The Uncommons. As a piece, what we say about The Uncommons, and we have to describe it to people, is that The Uncommons is the story of 5 unlikely outsiders that have to save each other to save the world. And as a writer, that's not something that's just lip service for me. When I say that about the story, I'm purposeful in that phrasing, because even though we have these characters that are all going on their own journeys, that are all experiencing growth and fighting battles in their own ways, the thing that's consistent about all of them is that in order for them to accomplish the end that they're aiming for, what's required is not only that they defeat the enemy in front of them, but that they save the person that's next to them. And On Common Ground was meant to be a more optimistic take on that concept. What would it look like if we leaned into the people that were on each side of us. What would that harmony and happiness look like? I think it's helpful that the Uncommons is a really diverse team. So when you bring the piece together in that capacity, it really ends up being something special.
It's really exciting. Well, we can't wait to unveil it. Share a little bit with the audience about Bree. Bree Indigo is an acclaimed freelance artist based in Orange County. They're author of Jamie, which is a free web comic series, and they're also an illustrator for quite a few books for young people, including Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, which is a middle grade graphic novel written by Ray Tercerio, published by Little Brown Books for Young Readers, and a number of other incredible graphic novels and series. So we were just absolutely thrilled to have Bree take part in this offering. So I wonder if, without further ado, we should unveil the collaboration. Wow. So Tony, it's amazing. I mean, their work is stunning. I know you've been a long admirer of
Yeah.
So as are we. So tell us about the inspiration behind it, and you spoke a little bit about it, but tell us about the characters and sort of what the process was like.
So Bree is an artist that I've wanted to collaborate with ever since the first time I saw their work. I think that there is something that Bree does with color, with characterization, as well as with facial expressions. It really makes artwork pop. And we were in very close communication around what the composition of the piece would be. I think that was the core part of it that kind of started everything. What's the composition of the piece? The Uncommons takes place in a time slightly farther ahead in the future than where we currently are now, where technology has had the chance to advance a lot, even though it's a short period of time. And the city is called Delta City because it's the fourth largest city in the world. And the first thing that was important to us as we kind of charted out the piece was making sure that the skyline of Delta City was visible. The idea that if we use Delta City as a backdrop and put this diverse group of people in the center of it, it's sending a message, number one, that humanity is at the center of kind of everything that we build and develop as a society, just like as the human race. This idea that no matter what we build, what giant things we're able to make, what massive pieces of architecture or technology advancements we're able to pioneer, we have to keep people at the center, which is something that I think is really important in an age of AI and machine learning. There was a bit of conversation over the course of the last week about technology development for kind of AI and augmented reality things. There was a man that brought up that on Zoom, when he would use a virtual background, his head would keep disappearing. It would only show him from like the collar down. His entire head would literally disappear. And one of his coworkers said, I thought he was joking. I thought he just needed to use a different background, but I used the same background and my head didn't disappear at all. And lo and behold, the man whose head kept disappearing was black, and the man whose head didn't disappear was white. And it brought up a conversation about how often are people of color not centered in the development of a lot of technology and advancements that we consider the things that make our technology modern. So the big thing for us was by putting the Uncommons at the center of Delta City, it kind of sends a subtle statement that everything that we build and everything that we make has to have people at the center of it. Another thing that we really focused on, it was kind of the sun that you see there, towards the top of the piece. I'm a sucker for skylines, and Bree draws skylines extremely well. The way that they use different blues and whites, the way that their rendering works, and their lighting and their shading, I think it's appropriate to have the sun kind of shining down on our team.
Yeah, it's incredible. They're just so talented. Thank you so much, Tony. And Erica, I'm just, I'd love to hear your response to the offering and kind of, how it spoke to you.
I think it's just beautifully done, and Tony, you and Bree did an incredible job and a really thoughtful job, especially with the composition. That's what struck me the first thing about this, because there's a lot of small subtleties that are in this picture that at first glance you don't notice, and then you start to pick up, like Tony said, like the light source, that it's coming from the top in the center, and if you look at the beams of light that are coming down, it perfectly frames the group and draws the eye to it through perspective. I think also, when you're working in a visual medium, you think a lot about the quote unquote camera angle, which is the reader, the viewer's perspective into the piece. And with this, the view is from lower down looking up at the group, which is a really subtle tie to very classic superhero portrayals. Like if you think of like a character like Superman, he's usually portrayed soaring over the city with the people on the ground that he's protecting and looking up at them. And this is doing the same thing where, the reader is put in the place of the people being protected, looking up at the heroes here. And I think it's just beautifully done with, the perspective lines of the city around them, but it doesn't distract from the group together. And the fact that everyone is connected, all the figures are touching, I think, all these small details together combine into a really beautiful and impactful image.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And we are absolutely thrilled to have Bree join us. Welcome, Bree. We were just singing your praises and admiring your incredible work. And we'd love to hear more about what inspired you and kind of what the process was like for you creating this.
Hi, sorry I'm late. Everybody hear me okay? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I don't often get to do huge illustrations, so I was really excited when Tony reached out to me. And also we've been meaning to work together for a little while, especially on Uncommon. I wanted personally to do something with Uncommon since I just find the cast really inspiring and cute and unique. So it was really nice to just get an opportunity to draw such a perfect combo of themes. Like the Uncommons constantly are just a symbol of the future, in my opinion, when it comes to kids superheroes. And then with the theme of peace, I don't know, I couldn't think of anything more perfect. So, we chatted a bit about the camera angle, like you guys were talking about. At first I started with something kind of looking at them, and they're all kind of looking off into the distance, but it was a little impersonal. And I'm glad that Tony had kind of guided back into the direction that we ended up with. And he definitely offered a lot of references and stuff to Delta City, which I was so intimidated by, but it's so beautiful. And so it was really nice excuse to tackle a skyline. My favorite thing to draw are characters interacting with one another. So I'm really glad that you guys really like that. I don't know, that's the main thing that I focus on in my art is people's interactions with one another, their body language and their expressions and stuff. So yeah, I'm rambling a little, but yeah.
One of the things that, many things that struck us about it is, as Tony said, your characters are so expressive, and would love to hear a little bit more about the different characters that are portrayed in the piece.
Yeah, he could probably tell you a little bit better about them since they're his babies.
Literally, I think about the uncommons and I go, my kids, my children. The ironic thing that I really love about this piece is that as a creator, there are things about the uncommons that I recognize and develop in my head that I know are coming up in the story later that nobody really knows about. And some of those things Bree was able to grab and incorporate into the illustration without knowing, without knowing that it was something that was coming down the pipeline. So it's this really cool, it felt good to know that, like, as a creator, I'm sending something out, and as a reader, Bree is picking that thing up. So of the uncommons, I think that the whole story gets kicked off, and the group is held together by our heroine in the middle, Iris. Iris is leader of the group and kind of haphazardly pulls the group together when she has this vision where she predicts from what her perspective is the end of the world. She has no idea what it is. She has no idea where it's coming from, but she knows that if she doesn't do anything, that there could be some major calamity that's taking place. And like I said earlier, the uncommons has always been about you have to save each other to save the world. So there's something poetic in the sense that when Iris has this vision where she knows things are going wrong, the first thing that she says is, okay, I'm going to need other people, which I think if more people made that decision very early in the process, we probably solve problems a lot faster. So often in the superhero genre, and even in the adventure genre, or even if we talk about our like solo protagonist heroes of YA genres, it very much becomes something is wrong with the world, and I, and only I, me, individual, me, singular, I must go and do this thing. And that's never felt interesting to me. I've always thought, that's probably not how that's gonna go. And it might have to do with the fact that when starting Weird Enough, I saw something about the world that I felt just fundamentally needed to change. And when I went and tried to do it by myself and just by myself, I fell on my face and got exhausted pretty fast. So Iris is the glue that holds the team together. She's joyful, and her power lies in her perspective. And I think that it's appropriate that she's the one that has this vision of something that something foreboding that could happen to the world. But also Iris sees something in each of the members of the Uncommons that even they haven't quite picked up on yet. So that's kind of why she's always middle and center. To my right of Iris, we have Chikara and Influencer. Influencer is the first person that Iris goes and grabs kind of on her journey to get this team together. And one of the core things about Influencer is that the way that he looks in this illustration isn't how he looks for the majority of the story. His powers kind of allow him to transform and morph and get much larger and more muscular. And the reason that he's Influencer is because he's built a very successful social media personality, large online platform based on this giant muscular form that he presents to the rest of the world. But when he's by himself and he just wants to be alone, he hangs out as his normal self. And I think it's important that he is his normal self here because a part of his character's journey is recognizing that the thing that's going to allow you to be most powerful is the thing that allows you to be the person that you actually want to be. Next to Influencer is Chikara, who my favorite thing about Chikara is that she's floating all the time. It just is what it is. In theory, their powers are supposed to be secret. They're not supposed to let people know that they have powers, but Chikara's kind of like, what are they going to do? Fight me? What possible consequence could there be for me? And it's, I told Bree when we were discussing kind of what characters could potentially look like and what they could potentially be doing, it's important for me to see Chikara smiling because she doesn't very often. It isn't until she's with the group and learn to kind of relax with the group that she's able to smile and able to overcome some things internally that kind of block her joy. So, which is a part of why she's so close to Iris, because Iris kind of does that for her. And then to the left of Iris, we have Echo and Sage. And I think that in the context of the group, Echo and Sage have a very, Echo and Sage play a very important role in that Echo is very strategic, tactical, and is also the oldest of the group, so help binds them together with that maturity. And right next to him, with Sage being the youngest, Sage has a bit of youthful optimism that plays into everything that he does. He kind of keeps the group young a little bit. But for the two of them together, I think something that's really important is that when they meet early on in the story, Sage is actually working with the enemy when he's introduced as a character for the first time. And Echo is the one that has an initial conflict with them. And they are on extremely bad terms at the end of that conflict. They're purposely pushing each other's buttons. They're gloating at one another. They're teasing each other to try and get the other one off their game. But between the two of them, we have Sage, who as a character is struggling to step away from the fact that he did some things that were objectively bad. And we have Echo, who in the very same sense is tackling questions where prior to joining the group, he did some things that he wasn't proud of, that he still isn't able to forgive himself for. So the two of them have a close relationship because for Sage looks at Echo and goes, oh, if I keep doing the right thing, then it's possible for me to leave my past behind. And Echo looks at Sage and thinks, well, if he can leave his past behind, maybe I can leave mine behind too. So there's a kind of symbiotic, I need you in order to overcome the thing that I wasn't able to overcome by myself, which again falls right back into our core belief to save each other, to save the world.
Absolutely. I love the way that you put that. And it resonates so powerfully with what you said in your bio. Really struck me about loving to tell stories of gentle boys, strong girls, and the great people in between, to bring attention to the humanity and different forms of love we all have as human beings. And that the goal of your creative career is to bring people together. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how that informs your work, inspires you, because it does so much to further, what we're here to talk about today is how the visual arts can help build peace and address matters of social justice and reach young people. And would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, hi. So when it comes to that, like, I mostly, like, throughout my whole childhood, but like adolescence, I was discovering that I didn't really relate too much to manly man or femi woman. And I always kind of felt like there could be more, not just because I didn't fit into that, but I just felt like it didn't explain everybody I knew. Like, I just knew people that didn't fit into those contexts. So as I grew up, I realized all my characters never fit the binary. I didn't fit a binary, and I felt free by that. And now as an adult, I've just kind of noticed, at least from my perspective as a non-binary person, that there's so much pain related to people being forced, even cisgender people being forced into stereotypes and outlines that don't fit them. And because of that, like, forcing you to be what you're not or what doesn't feel right, so much pain starts. And that pain, it manifests in different ways. So I don't think that it's the only problem in the world. I just think that if I could tell stories of the fluid, like the fact that everyone is fluid in some way, based on our gender descriptions, I guess, then maybe more people can see themselves in other characters. And granted, I know that like mainstream stories don't just follow manly men and girly girls, like not anymore, but I just kind of want to always, like I always want to, like my favorite characters are sensitive men. Like one of my favorite characters is Steven Universe. I cry every time I meet that character. I'm just like, oh, what a perfect person. And also I'm really appreciative of like Steven Universe future, because like it touches on so much more than just we're gonna fight the bad guys, you know. And that's what I try to represent in my characters too. And when I was younger, I didn't even really understand that I was drawing like non-binary characters. I was just like, I'm just gonna draw a pretty boy in a dress and whatever. And then I'm like, oh man, I have a trans female character. Like I realized that's what it was. I just didn't know that's what I was drawing at the time. But yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, it does. It's just so cool and so powerful, and aligns so much, obviously, with your work, Tony, and the genesis of Weird Enough. And I'm really struck by the fact that all three of you as professionals focus on young people in different ways. And, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about the importance of that and why it's so critical to reach youth, through storytelling, through arts, and how that can be transformative. And you spoke to that a fair bit, but it's striking to me that given your breadth of talents, that all three of you have really focused on trying to reach people early in their lives. Tony, you want to take that?
I mean,
I wanted to make space for Erica if she wanted.
Yeah, and Erica, because that's really your area of expertise in publishing. I know you do other books as well, but that's been your love and passion.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a kid, reading was such a critical part of my development and growing up into the person I am, and finding refuge in books was just so vital. And when I went into this career, that was what was most important to me, working in an area to help provide books to the next generation of readers so that they can have that same experience. Because for kids, reading it's escapism, it's entertainment, it's also a way of self-exploration. Fiction especially holds up a mirror to the reader so that, they can see themselves in stories, but also learn things about themselves, especially when it comes to sexuality and gender, and being able to learn and see themselves and, tap into something. So that was, just so important to me. And I think is something that should be growing, especially in the industry, so that there's more of those opportunities for young readers to pick up a book, even if it's fantasy, science fiction, mystery, and see themselves really reflected as the hero, and, find something that resonates with them.
Yeah, that's really very true. Bree, did you kind of always know that your artwork was going to be directed at a younger audience? Was that something that was just a natural evolution, or?
I definitely think it was natural. I just finished answering a Q&A with a student. Sometimes they ask questions to professionals about the field that they're in, and they asked like how I got into it. And I just said, I don't think that it was how I got into it. I think it was just meant to be. Like I could not see myself doing anything other than storytelling. And throughout my childhood, God, I keep saying childhood, but adolescence, I was just so empathetic, and I worried about other people's issues more than my own. and it helped me lose my way, honestly. And I just wanted to help people know they were not alone and stuff like that. And I just kind of felt like that was the main group of people that need to know that, at least after I experienced it, was teenagers and, you know, people coming of age. Like they have so many questions, and at this point they're actually like, they're developing so much faster and in such wonderful ways, it seems. But I just want them to know that, you know, they're not alone. Like the issues that they're facing, I don't want to like continue down the path of just like, well, it's part of it, you got to get over it, you got to be tough. It's like, nah, man, like stuff's tough, but it doesn't have to be tougher than that. And we can acknowledge that you are depressed in high school. We can acknowledge you have social anxiety. We can acknowledge that you don't fall into the perfect example of like a student, you know, like your strengths might be in something that they don't even focus on in high school. And I don't know, I'm now going on a tangent, but but I just, it had to be like, I don't think that like when it comes to certain adults, like there's just a point where they're not going to change. Like I'm only almost 30, and I'm already like, oh man, I'm getting to that I don't care phase. Like, like, so yeah.
I think that's such an important point. It's a time when people are young people are trying to figure out who they are, how they fit in. And that's where, you know, so many of the issues that you all three of you address in the types of work you do is critical. It's about representation and being able to see themselves in a world and find their place. Tony, did you want to add anything? Did you always know that it was going to be, that Weird Enough was going to be focused on youth? And
I think that the reason that Weird Enough focuses on young people, and the reason that my work as a writer kind of focuses on young people, is because I believe in young people a lot more than I believe in anybody else. I think that for me, there's I believe in young people, and as a result of that belief, I feel an obligation to make sure that they have resources that allow them to fit their potential. And I don't think that those resources, especially in the literature space, are currently there. I think that the way that we think about literature, the way that we think about art, and the way that we think about what young people should be reading are really backwards majority of the time. And I think that a over-reliance on canon and the idea that works are compulsory reading just because they happen to be old ends up holding a bunch of young people back, and honestly removing a joy of reading. I know that's what happened for me. I can't think of all of the books that I had to read when I was in middle school and high school that were considered classics or books that I really needed to know. I can think of only two that I actually enjoyed: Fahrenheit 451 and Of Mice and Men. And to be honest, I feel like the reason I liked Of Mice and Men was because of the memes that we made about hiding in the brush while we were reading it, and not actually because of the book itself. And I remember being forced to read all these books because you're going to need to know these books. And if you don't know these books, then the sky's going to fall because society and culture is based on these books. And now I'm 26 years old. I'm like, honestly, the only thing that would have happened if I hadn't read these books is that there were like one or two Family Guy jokes that I wouldn't have gotten. Like, that's it. It's literally the only bad thing that would have happened to me. Yeah. Because my belief is that if universal themes are actually universal, then we can get them from more than one place, if they're as universal as you say. So my journey is really rooted in pushing the envelope on what a universal theme is and showing that the same things that you expect me to get from the canon, it is possible for me to get from other places, and it's just as valid if I get it from another place.
I think that's a really vitally important point. And Erica, I wonder if you can speak to that, because the books and the visual art that we have available, or that young people have available, is impacted by the gatekeepers, the agents, the editors, the publishers. And would love to hear you talk about sort of what you would like to see more of, strides perhaps publishing is trying to make, where we need to go, what you're seeing, the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, just building a little bit on what Tony said, you know, the quote unquote canon that's out there, it's, you know, hasn't changed. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the reference, but I saw someone post recently on social media that, you know, they got in their child's, you know, required reading list for high school English, and it's the same 20 books that they read, you know, 30 years ago in their English class. Like, it hasn't changed, but you know, so many new books have come out since then, and there's a wealth of new literature that's available that just isn't being put in the hands of young people, at least in an educational setting. And, you know, as someone in the industry thinking about that, there's been wonderful strides, you know, not nearly far enough, but you know, in recent years to start to veer away from that straight white male, quote unquote, norm that was to be expected as like the universal experience, when it's not. It's really not. And transitioning away from that and making more space at the table for people of color, for the LGBTQ community, for the disabled community, so that their experiences can really be reflected, and that there would be a vast array of literature for them as well. So, you know, as an agent, when I'm thinking about working with new writers, what I'm thinking about is, you know, A, is it well written? Because that's always the question, but also, you know, who is the reader here? What does the audience want from this book, and what are they going to take away from it? Especially when you work with writers who write for children and young adults. The first thing you always have to wonder is this going to open doors for young readers, or is this going to unintentionally harm young readers? Because there are a lot of stereotypes out there. So that should always be in the forefront of every author's mind, because, you know, when a young reader picks up a book and the representation isn't accurate or isn't truthful, it's going to cause harm. And that should, you know, be everyone's concern, because you want to foster enthusiastic young readers. So, you know, that's something that should always be considered and discussed at all levels of publishing, whether it's between authors and agents, agents and editors, authors and editors, and within the publishing house, that you're making space, you're promoting voices, but you're also, you know, putting out literature that helps and encourages and is inclusive and not indirectly causing harm.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And Bree, I'm wondering if there were books, visual artists, storytellers that really spoke to you when you were young.
Yeah, so this is really hard to admit, but like I don't remember a lot of things inspiring me other than like art when I was young. So I don't think that I wasn't big into reading. I didn't get into comics until I was in middle school. And I didn't actually like reading chapter books either. I think that I read like Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century's books, or Sailor Moon from the library, but it wasn't accessible to me either. My mother wasn't able to be around because she worked extremely hard. And then when I did get access to a library, I was like, this exists? What? You know? And at school, my teachers never really, never really urged me to. So it wasn't until I got older and I actually found a group of friends that they introduced me to like manga and stuff like that. And that's when like my world was like blown up, and I was just like, oh my God, there's so much out there. But I was more into, I was a cartoon kid. Like I watched like and then like draw alongs, like Pappy drew it on PBS or something. I don't know. But when I did like get into to reading, I found myself enjoying like the like dystopian stories and stuff. Like I really liked The Giver, but it was because it made me think, and that was probably the only book that I read in school that was like, oh, that Mechanical for Leibowitz. But again, like these are all kind of like not even antiquated, but it's just like, all right, you know, they are what they are, and they're gonna keep getting passed down. One thing I did want to add to the conversation was that I think that even if publishers, you know, go out of their way to be more inclusive and people had a taste, like, just like I said, you know, if as a kid, I don't really know what my options are, like, I'm going to just fall into whatever's provided for me. So it's about like, you know, we have to have more passionate, like obviously better paid teachers, but more passionate people who are in the educational field. They have to be more interested in giving kids opportunities, not just cranking them down a tube so that they can go and be the next like gear, you know, like give them like focus on like what this kid's strength is, and then guide them down the best possible path. And if that means they want to be creative, or if they are looking for guidance through, like they're looking for guidance that maybe you as a teacher or as a parent that can't really help with, maybe you can find a book that they're interested, that like that maybe would help them, because not everyone's expected to have, you know, a fountain of knowledge. Like there are things that you won't know as a teacher or as a parent, you know. But, that's
I think that's such an important point, because it goes back to the ideas that are so foundational to your work and to your work, Tony, about sense of community, and that we all have a role to play that's really important, and that even the best told stories, most inclusive stories, the best visual art, it has to be shared, and it has to be available, it has to be accessible. I think that's a really important point. We do have some questions, if you all would be willing to take a few. How long do you think it will take for everyone to be comfortable with non-mainstream representation, and how long would you like it to take? And what are the steps that we as consumers can take to quicken this process? Tony?
So my very radical opinion about that is that kids aren't uncomfortable with diverse representation. Literally, like if you think about it, you put a 3-year-old in front of a TV and you go, yo, this story is about a moose, a dog, and a penguin. And the kid goes, cool. And then you go, this story is about cars. And they talk and they have complex relationships. And the kid goes, cool. And you go, this story is about bumblebees and the life that they live in the hive. They're anthropomorphic bees. And the kid's like, yeah, man, it's cool. I'm fine. I'm having a great time. It's not until they get a little older and societally we go, oh, this is the norm for who normally is the hero, or who does what, or who is supposed to fit in what role, that they start following cues. I think, honestly, if we leave kids alone, then it's fine. I'm a big Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, and the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, the creators had to fight with Nickelodeon because the second Avatar that they feature is a woman of color, and the network was like, I don't know if young boys are going to relate to her. I don't know if they're going to look up to her. And the creators really had to fight them on that. And for me, that makes no sense, because I'm like, the only people that are telling young boys they're not supposed to look up to female characters is y'all. Y'all are the people that are enforcing the, like when it comes to diverse stories, we say, well, we don't make diverse stories because they don't sell. It's like, well, if you don't make them, then they will continue to not sell. Do you see how it how it continues to be cyclical in that manner? I think that there are things that we as a people and as a culture have to let go. I never have an issue getting a kid to pick up a story and enjoy it or find something that they like about it. Instead, I have issues dealing with whether their parent thinks that something is appropriate for them or not.
It goes to your point, Bree, about the adults in young people's lives being part of making these works available to them and taking an active role in making sure the books they read, the art they see is inclusive. And is there anything you wanted to add to that, more we can do?
I kind of had just a brain fart when I was coming to my, because my brain goes a mile a minute. I'm like, all right, now linearize it. I completely agree with Tony. Like, it just comes down to mostly the people who are in control of children's lives are the ones that restrict it. And that's fine, you know, traditions and stuff like that. So I think that, why do traditions exist? Like, let's just melt them away. All it does is hold us back. I think that if more adults can challenge their experiences, everyone's going to think that the way that they were brought up is the normal way, no matter what. Even if, like, what was in the 70s, boy color was pink, like, anyone then was just like, yeah, that's normal. And now it's the opposite, but no one even acknowledges the fact that it was the opposite. It's like adults need to take a moment, question their bias, question their experience, question everything, and then think, am I restricting my child in this new age from thriving? Like, the kids are going to decide what they want their future to be. And they're not going to stop just because their parents always disagree. It just means that they just have to wait a little longer for things to change the way they want it to be. So I think that if we're going to have a more unified future, there has to be more effort, literally, on the people who are responsible for the children. Like, there just has to be more effort, because I don't like hearing, oh, like the future is, the kids are the future. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, they shouldn't have to figure out how to navigate the world that they were brought into just to make it a better place. It should be a collaborative effort. And parents shouldn't have to be dragged kicking and screaming. Like, I don't know, that's just my opinion of it. And something as small as the adults maybe not always being up in arms about certain representation in media could be just a small portion of it, you know, like just bringing up Steven Universe one more time. Like, I've had a couple family friends whose parents are just like, I don't know if I want my kid watching that. I'm just like, it's the most healthy thing I've ever seen. Like, are you kidding me? But you let the kids sit by and watch. Like, granted, I love it, like American Dad and Family Guy. I'm like, whatever, you know, it has the right to exist, but like, your kid can watch that, but you're not okay with Steven Universe. Got it. Okay. I don't know what we're prioritizing here.
Yeah, there's a lot of love for Steven Universe, I think, in this forum. I know, Erica, you're also a fan. And from a publishing perspective, a book publishing perspective, how do these questions and like, when you're reviewing work that's coming in to consider representing it, how do these questions inform what you do, and how do you balance sort of all the, you know, the variables we're talking about in terms of both needing, you know, to break down barriers, but also give works that will reach a wide audience, and how do you address these issues?
Oh, that's a tough question, because, you know, I feel like, you know, books have a purpose, and you know, have, when they find the right reader, it's just so transformative. So, you know, when it comes to being more inclusive, I'm, you know, looking for works that show a wide range of experiences. I feel like when, as an industry, we start to make more space at the table, whether it's for people of color, for the queer experience, I think sometimes the first step is to look for books that try to teach readers when they really shouldn't. It should just be inclusive in the sense that, you know, maybe the protagonist is a person of color or a queer person or someone, you know, showing what life is like with mental illness or with disability, but not necessarily, you know, we're going to teach you a lesson like through this. It should just be a story that centers that character and not necessarily try to inform or instruct or impart some sort of valuable lesson to the reader. You know, I feel like the first step a lot of time is to show stories of trauma as a teaching method, when really we should be promoting stories of joy.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. We have another question. It's a question that is really front of mind with all that's happening in our culture now. Why is it so important to leverage the power of storytelling to bring awareness to injustices that have not been fully addressed? And how powerful is our art in creating change? And how can we take full advantage of that power?
From my point of view, I think that there is a very inconsistent trend for whose history is allowed to be told and whose history is remembered. And part of what makes media and storytelling so important is that creatively we get to bring back a lot of history that people didn't know about and present it in ways that are a little more compulsory. So if you think about Watchmen, the HBO series, and when Watchmen came out, something that was really central in Watchmen was the bombing of Black Wall Street. And there are a bunch of people on Twitter like, wait, did that happen? Did that happen? Did that actually happen? And I remember looking at it and going, y'all didn't know about that? Nobody told y'all about that? Crazy. That's ridiculous. Or in Lovecraft Country in episode 1, when they're talking about sundown towns, people are like, were sundown towns an actual thing? Like literally a few days after the first episode dropped, people were like, the untold history of sundown towns. People posting all these articles. I'm like, it's untold to who? Who didn't tell you about these things? I had a conversation with a friend where I was like, did y'all not have to do Black History Month projects in school? And she was like, no. And I was like, every February, I had to write a 5-page paper about a Black person from history and show up to class dressed as that person and give a biography presentation as if I was that person. I dressed as Will Smith one year, and y'all didn't have to do this? You weren't obligated to do that in any way? Crazy. Ridiculous. I think that understanding how much of a deficit there is in whose history we prioritize and what traumatic events get left behind and eventually denied. Stories offer an unparalleled opportunity to bring those things back to the main front and go, no, this happened. And this influenced things. This had an impact on things, and we're not going to leave it behind.
Cutting really quick. So because so much history of like not white male history is erased or just ignored, it kind of leaves these huge, I guess if you're going to think of society as like a brain, it leaves like gaps in memory. And then people are like, well, I don't understand how we got here. How did we get here when everything is perfect? Everything just was like this, right? This is the timeline. But then you're like, no, let's add this huge chunk here, this huge chunk here, all of these cause and effect events here. Then you see how we got here. Then you see how things are the way that they are without you really questioning them. I mean, bringing up how Tony brought up Black History Month, I was never forced to, and I hate like to say forced, but like we were never pushed to do Black History Month in any of my schools. And even when we did, people, like I literally heard people complaining, even Black people complaining, oh, I don't want to do this, you know? It's on top of that, most people don't want to learn about their history anyway because it's not made interesting, which I think is a ploy to make people uninterested in their history. But then on top of that, it's like, why are we not questioning like how, like taking a step back out of your experience in the community and society, looking at something like Black History Month and not going, wait, why is there only a month? Why are we focusing on this only for a month? It is history. It's not February's history. Like what's going on? Like, granted, it's more than some communities get, but it really shouldn't be a situation where it's like white history and then we're gonna pepper in a little bit of everybody else because it's only relevant sometimes and only what we say is relevant, only what won't make people upset, you know, but sorry, just wanted to
no, I think that's, it's really important. Erica, I'm wondering, you know, what you're seeing in the publishing industry in terms of the power of storytelling to address injustices. I think there's been a very powerful trend to try to open the door, as we've been talking about, to bring in more voices. And I just wonder, you know, kind of how you see the influence of books in being in storytelling to be able to address the injustices.
Sure. Well, one of the beautiful things about fiction is that, you know, not only is it reflective of our world around us, but it is an opportunity for writers to write the world that they want to see, and the world that it should be. And I think, you know, the power of storytelling is that you're able to make a deep emotional connection with readers and to show them, you know, not just this is wrong, but this is what should be, whether it's, you know, regarding race, regarding sexuality. I feel like a broken record.
No, it's very true. Yeah.
Sorry. But, you know, that in itself is just so powerful and, you know, can inspire so much in readers.
Yeah. Well, we just have time for one last question. Tony, you have said in the past, and it's something that is at the core of Weird Enough Productions, that being yourself is a superpower. How can we encourage everyone to become their own hero? What does it mean to be super? And how can we encourage everyone to identify sort of that authentic power in themselves?
I think that self-discovery and self-actualization is really hard work. And a lot of the times it's displayed as like this sunshine and rainbows moment where the clouds kind of part and the sun beams down on you and there's a rainbow, and or maybe you digivolve, I don't know. It's shown as this instant thing, but I think it's a process, and a part of what keeps the process going is loving yourself enough to ask yourself the difficult questions that you feel yourself running from. I think that the thing that stops most of us from being our best selves is fear. And I think that in order to get there and to achieve that, we have to kind of run towards that fear. We have to address that fear. We have to address that trauma. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always a one and done type thing. Sometimes you got to come back to it every week. I'm in the process of creating right now because for whatever reason, I decided to make a TikTok, and that has addressed my fears about how I'm perceived and how people look at me and if people disagree with me or not in a lot of ways. And I think that at the beginning, I was like, I'm going to say what I have to say. I'm going to be genuine to myself. And regardless of if people show up and watch it or not, I'm going to be happy that I put it out there. And that was great for the first time I did it. But when you go back to make the second time, sometimes you got to fight the same battle again. I think you got to be willing to tackle that fear and to dive into that fear.
Well, we really can't thank you all enough for joining us. This has just been an incredible discussion, and we're just thrilled and honored to, you know, be able to partner with Weird Enough and Bree to have you create this beautiful offering. And Erica, we so appreciate your perspectives, and hope that everyone will continue to tune in for the other Peace Studio seminars that are coming up and check out the offerings. Certainly take another look at Breeze. It's day 68 and of 100. So anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Really appreciate it.